The city was glowing with lights, yet her heart was filled with darkness. Her name was Leora, daughter of a powerful alien family, and tonight was the night she hated most. It was the night of her forced marriage, a deal made not for love, but for power. Her father had chosen a husband for her, a cruel man with cold eyes, a man who only wanted control. The wedding hall was filled with nobles dressed in shining clothes, whispering to one another. They called it a celebration, but to her, it was a cage. Music played, food was served, but inside her chest her heart was crying. She sat on a throne-like chair, wearing a heavy gown. The jewels sparkled, but they felt like chains around her body. Everyone was smiling, but she was not. Her eyes searched for freedom, but the doors were guarded by tall soldiers. There was no way out, or so it seemed. Her father stood in front of the crowd, his voice strong. He told the people that tonight was a night of unity, a night that would bring more power to the family, but Leora knew the truth. It was not about unity, it was about control. She was just a tool, a pawn in his hands. The groom entered, tall and proud. His armor reflected the glowing lights of the hall. He walked towards her with a cruel smile as if he had already won. Leora's stomach twisted. She could not imagine a life with him. His eyes were like fire, not of love, but of hunger for power, looked at her like she was a prize, not a person. Her hands trembled, hidden inside her gown. She whispered to herself, "I must get out. I must escape." Her voice was soft, but her heart shouted louder than the music. She thought about the life waiting for her, a life where every day she would be chained to this man, a life where her dreams would die, and in that moment, she felt something new. She felt courage. The priest of their people raised his hands. He spoke the old words, the words of binding. Soon, she would be tied to this man forever. The guests clapped, the music grew louder. Her father smiled proudly, but Leora's breath became heavy. Her chest felt like it would break. Then, something happened inside her, a spark of defiance, a voice that said, "Run now, or be a prisoner forever." Her eyes moved quickly to the doors. Again, the guards were watching, but they were not many. The music was loud, the crowd was distracted. She realized this was her chance. The priest asked her to give her vow. The groom looked at her with greedy eyes, waiting for her to say yes, but instead of speaking, she stood up suddenly. Her chair fell behind her with a loud crash. Everyone turned to look, shocked. Her heart raced like thunder, but her legs moved fast. She ran, her gown dragging on the floor, jewels falling off. The guards shouted, running after her. Her father's voice echoed in the hall, full of rage. "Stop her! Do not let her escape!" he shouted, but Leora did not stop. She pushed through the crowd, through the shining nobles. Gasps filled the room, whispers of disbelief. Is she running away from her own wedding? They said. Her feet carried her faster than she ever thought possible. She ran through a side passage out of the glowing hall. The music faded behind her, replaced by the sound of alarms. The palace walls shook with noise. Guards were chasing, their boots striking the floor, but Leora did not look back. She could only think of freedom. Her lungs burned. Her heart screamed, but she ran. The night air hit her face as she broke out of the palace. The city outside was alive with neon colors and strange sounds. Flying ships moved across the sky, markets buzzed with energy. But to her, it was all a blur. She only wanted one thing, to be free. Her gown tore as she ran into the crowd. The jewels she wore scattered like broken stars. The people looked at her in shock, some recognizing the bride, but she kept running, faster. Behind her, the guards shouted louder, their voices angry, but she refused to stop. She had escaped the wedding, but the chase had only begun. And in that moment, in the middle of the alien city, her life changed forever, because freedom was no longer just a dream. It was something she was ready to fight for. The streets were alive with chaos, but Leora did not slow down. Her feet carried her into the heart of the alien city, her gown ripped and heavy, yet she forced herself to run. Behind her, the alarms screamed across the sky, and the voices of the guards echoed like thunder. They were hunting her, their shouts filling the night air, but her heart was louder, beating with one word only: freedom. The city was vast and strange, filled with tall towers covered in glowing signs. Flying ships buzzed above her, darting like insects in the neon sky. The markets below were crowded, filled with aliens of all shapes and colors, strange smells of food mixed with smoke and burning lights. Yet to her, everything blurred. Because she knew the hunters were close, she pushed through the crowd, her hands trembling as she shoved past strangers. The people gasped, some recognizing her face. "The bride," they whispered. "She is running away." Others stepped back, in fear, because they saw the guards chasing behind her. The soldiers shouted orders, their metallic boots slamming against the stone streets. They carried weapons that glowed with deadly fire. If they caught her, her fate would be worse than the marriage she had just fled. Her lungs burned. Her body begged her to stop. But she could not stop. Not now. Not when she had tasted the air of freedom. The city twisted into narrow alleys, glowing with broken lights. She turned sharply into one, her breath ragged, her gown dragging on the filthy ground. The alley was darker, quieter, but danger was everywhere. She pressed her back against the wall, her chest rising and falling like a drum. She listened, praying the guards had lost her, but the sound of boots grew louder again. They were searching, their voices sharp, their scanners humming in the air. She clenched her fists, tears filling her eyes. She thought, "I cannot run forever. I need a way out. I need something, someone." Her eyes darted to the street ahead, and there she saw something strange. A line of vehicles hovering by the curb, bright colors flashing. Engines humming low. They were taxis, small flying machines that carried people across the city. One of them landed close to the alley, its doors sliding open with a hiss. Inside, she saw a figure unlike the others, a man with human features, sitting. Behind the controls, his skin was different, his eyes sharp and tired. He looked at her with surprise, as if he could not believe what he was seeing. Humans were rare in this city, and most aliens hated them. They were outsiders, unwanted, treated as second class. But here, in this moment, the only escape she could see was this man's taxi. The guards' voices grew closer, their lights flashing against the walls. Her choice was clear: stay and be captured, or trust the stranger. Her heart pounded as she whispered to herself, "It is him or death." Without thinking, she ran out of the alley and threw herself inside the taxi. "Drive," she gasped, her voice shaking. "Please, drive now." The human's eyes widened, his hands gripping the controls. For a second, he looked like he might push her out, but then he saw the shadows of soldiers racing toward them. He cursed under his breath and slammed the controls forward. The taxi lifted with a roar, shooting into the air. The city below shrank as they rose higher and higher. Leora clung to the seat, her chest heaving, her eyes wide. She had never been so close to a human before. He glanced at her quickly, his face lined with suspicion. "Who are you?" he asked sharply. "Why are they chasing you?" But she could not answer, not yet. Her throat was dry, her body shaking. All she could do was whisper, "Just go faster, please." The taxi darted through the sky, weaving between taller ships. The human's hands were skilled, moving the controls like he had done this for years. Behind them, she saw the flashing lights of the guards' flyers. They were chasing, their weapons firing bursts of red light. Explosions lit the air as the human swerved. Diving between towers, the sound of engines roared in her ears, her heart ready to break. For a moment, she wondered if she had made a mistake. She was trapped with a human, someone her people always warned her about. But at the same time, this human was the only reason she was still free. The guards kept shooting. The city shook with noise. The taxi slipped into a narrow tunnel, lights flickering along the walls. The soldiers followed, their ships scraping the metal sides as they tried to keep up. Inside the taxi, silence hung heavy except for the sound of engines. The human glanced at her again, his eyes hard but curious. "You brought trouble with you?" he muttered. She swallowed, her voice trembling but clear. I was being forced to marry a man I hate, she said. And I chose to run. He raised his eyebrows, a strange smile touching his lips for a second. Running away from marriage, he said. That's one way to start trouble. But before she could answer, the scanners of the guards lit the tunnel behind them. Their ships were close again. Their voices echoing through the metal passage, the human tightened his grip on the controls. Hold on, he said, his voice low. Because this ride is about to get dangerous. And with that, the taxi shot forward into the unknown. The chase had only begun, and both their lives were about to change forever. The taxi rattled through the air, engines burning as it darted between the glowing towers of the alien city. Inside, silence pressed down heavy, broken only by the hum of machines and the pounding of Leora's heart. She sat frozen, clutching the edge of her seat, her eyes flicking toward the man at the controls. He was human, his face sharp with lines of struggle, his hands steady even while danger screamed all around them. No alien ever trusted a human. Yet here she was, sitting inches away from one. She could not decide if she had leapt into freedom or into another trap. The man did not speak at first. His eyes fixed on the flashing lights of the guards behind them. He twisted the controls sharply. The taxi spinning down into a crowded lane of flying traffic. The soldiers followed, their weapons blazing, but he slid between ships with ease. His movements were smooth, like someone who had lived half his life running from danger. Finally, when the gunfire faded for a moment, he spoke. His voice was rough, carrying the tone of someone who had seen too much. Who are you? And why did you bring an army to my door? He asked. Leora struggled to find words, her throat dry, her chest heavy. She looked at him, at his tired eyes and his scarred hands, and she whispered, I was being forced into marriage. The human snorted, a bitter laugh escaping him. Marriage, he said, almost mocking. That doesn't sound like something worth dying for. But Leora's face was pale, her eyes wet with fear. You don't understand, she said softly. It was not love, it was power. They would have chained me forever. The man's eyes flickered just for a second, as if her words touched something deep inside him. He did not answer, but his jaw tightened. The guards returned, their ships, roaring behind. Red beams of energy shot past the taxi, shaking it with each near hit. The human's hands moved faster. Pulling the taxi into a nosedive, Leora screamed as the city lights spun above her head. But the human did not flinch, not even once. He pulled them into a dark tunnel beneath the lower city. The soldiers' ships thundered past, missing their turn. For a moment, silence returned. Leora's chest heaved, her body trembling. She looked at him again, this strange human who had saved her by accident. Why did you help me? She asked, her voice shaking. He did not look at her. His eyes stayed on the dark path ahead. Because if I hadn't, we'd both be dead, he said flatly. But don't mistake that for kindness. She blinked, confused. What do you mean? She asked. The man finally turned to face her, his gaze sharp and cold. People like me don't get involved, he said. Humans don't belong in this city. We survive by staying quiet, by not drawing attention. He leaned closer, his eyes narrowing, and now because of you, every guard in the city is looking for us both. Shame burned in her chest, but also anger. I didn't ask to be born into chains, she said, her voice trembling but firm. And I didn't ask for your taxi to be my only escape. For the first time, he stared at her with something other than suspicion. It was curiosity, mixed with a faint flicker of respect. He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. What's your name? He asked. Leora, she whispered. And yours? He hesitated, then muttered, Daniel. The taxi drifted deeper into the tunnel, the light outside fading into shadow. The silence between them grew heavier, filled with unspoken questions. Daniel's hands tapped the controls, steady and careful. He glanced at her again, his voice lower this time. Do you know what happens to humans who help aliens? He asked. Leora shook her head slowly. They disappear, he said coldly. Your people already hate us, and your guards will make sure I vanish for this. Her heart clenched. guilt twisting inside her. "I never wanted to bring this on you," she whispered, but Daniel only looked forward, his jaw tight. The taxi rumbled as it reached the end of the tunnel. Outside lay the Undercity, a place filled with shadows, smoke, and danger. Neon signs flickered weakly. Broken machines scattered the streets. It was a place where the powerful never came, and the forgotten lived. Daniel landed the taxi on a hidden platform, shutting down the engines with a sigh. He leaned back in his chair, staring at her with tired eyes. "You should get out," he said. "Find another way before they catch you." Leora froze, fear rising in her chest. "You're leaving me here?" she asked, her voice breaking. Daniel shrugged, his face unreadable. "I already risked my life once," he said. "Don't ask me for more." Tears welled in her eyes, but anger burned through them. "You think you're the only one who suffers?" she asked, her voice sharp. "I was about to lose everything, my freedom, my life, my soul. I chose to run even if it kills me." Daniel stared at her, silent, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the only sound was the low hum of the taxi, cooling down. Then he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing again. "You're brave," he admitted. "But bravery gets people killed." Leora met his gaze, her voice steady. "Then maybe it's better to die free than live in chains." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and sharp. Daniel looked away, his jaw clenched, his hands tightening on the wheel. In his eyes, a storm was rising, a memory he did not want to face, because he too knew what it meant to live in chains. And though he said nothing in that moment, something inside him began to change. The Undercity was cold and filled with smoke. Shadows stretched across broken walls. Neon lights flickered weakly like dying stars. Leora sat inside the taxi, her body trembling, but her eyes firm. Daniel leaned against the dashboard, silent, his face hidden in the dim glow of the controls. For a long time, neither spoke. The only sound was the distant hum of machines and the echo of footsteps in the streets below. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "You should leave," he said quietly. "Before I regret helping you." But Leora shook her head, her voice trembling, yet strong. "They will find me if I leave, and when they do, I will be dragged back to him." Daniel's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "To your husband," he muttered, the word heavy with bitterness. "He is not my husband," she whispered, sharply. "I ran before they could finish the vow." Daniel tilted his head, studying her. "And why did you run? Many in this city are chained, but few dare to fight it." Leora looked away, her gaze lost in the shadows outside. "My father wanted power, and that man wanted control," she said softly. "But I wanted freedom." The word hung in the air, sharp and dangerous. Daniel stared at her, something flickering in his eyes, something he tried to hide. "You talk about freedom like you know what it means," he said, his tone cold. But she turned back to him, her eyes glowing with defiance. "I do know," she replied, "because I almost lost it forever." Daniel's hands gripped the wheel tightly, his knuckles white. He looked away, his voice lower now, as if speaking to himself. "You remind me of something I tried to forget." Leora leaned forward, her curiosity burning. "What do you mean?" she asked. But Daniel's eyes darkened, his jaw set hard. "Humans came here long ago," he began slowly. "We thought we could live among your people, trade, learn, survive." His voice grew sharper, filled with anger, buried deep. "But your leaders saw us as weak. They used us, pushed us into the shadows. They made us less than citizens, less than people." Leora's breath caught. She had heard whispers of this, but never the truth spoken so directly. Daniel's eyes burned now, his voice bitter. "My parents worked until they died. My brother was taken by guards and never came back. I learned fast. Freedom does not exist. For people like me." Silence filled the taxi again, heavy and painful. Leora felt guilt twisting in her chest. Her people had built this world of chains, and now she had lived it herself. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice soft. Daniel laughed bitterly, a hollow sound. Sorry does not bring them back, he said. Sorry does not stop the guards from hunting us, but Leora did not look away, her voice steady despite her fear. Then why did you save me? She asked. Daniel froze, his eyes flicking to hers. For a moment he had no answer. Finally, he muttered, because I couldn't watch someone else lose their freedom too. Her chest tightened at his words. She saw it now. Beneath his anger and his walls there was something more. He was a man who had lost everything yet still carried the fire of resistance in his heart. Maybe, she said softly. We are not so different. Daniel turned away, his voice sharp again. Don't make that mistake, princess, he spat. You are the daughter of power and I am the child of nothing. But before she could respond, the sound of engines roared outside. Lights flashed against the broken walls of the Undercity. The guards had found them, their scanners sweeping the U area. Daniel cursed under his breath, his hands flying to the controls. Strap in, he said, his voice tense. This isn't over. The taxi roared back to life, lifting off the hidden platform. Leora gripped the seat, her heart racing. The sky above them lit with red beams of energy as the guards closed in. Daniel spun the taxi sharply, diving between ruined towers, the city flashing by in streaks of neon. Why are they so desperate? To take you alive? Daniel shouted over the noise. Leora's eyes burned with fear as she answered, because if I marry him, my father gains control of 2 great houses. And if I don't? Daniel pressed, swerving past a blast of fire. Then their power is broken, she cried, and I am the one standing in the way. Daniel's eyes narrowed as her words sank in. He understood now why the soldiers hunted her so fiercely. She wasn't just a runaway bride, she was the spark that could unravel everything her father had built. Do you see now? Leora shouted, gripping the seat. It was never just marriage, it was war disguised as love. The guards fired again, explosions shaking the taxi. Daniel's jaw tightened, his hands steady as he wove through the storm of fire. Your secret is out now, he muttered. And it's bigger than I thought. Leora met his gaze, her voice fierce despite her trembling. Then you understand why I can't stop running. The words hit him harder than he expected. For years he had survived by keeping his head down, by refusing to fight. But this girl, this alien princess, had chosen defiance even when the cost was death. Something stirred inside him, something he thought he had buried. Maybe freedom was not dead, not yet. The taxi shot out of the Undercity and back into the open night. The chase thundered behind them, but inside the taxi something had changed. Daniel no longer saw her as a burden. He saw her as a mirror of his own fight, a fight he had long abandoned. And though he would not say it yet, he knew the truth. Her secret had not only revealed her struggle, it had awakened his own. The night sky tore open with fire as the guards closed in. Daniel's taxi rattled under the storm of red beams, its engines screaming. Leora clung to the seat, her knuckles white, her breath caught between fear and hope. Behind them, a fleet of sleek black ships lit up the sky like angry predators, their weapons glowing. Daniel's eyes narrowed, his hands steady on the controls. He twisted the ship into a sharp dive, neon towers flashing past them in a blur, energy bolts scorched, the air exploding against walls and sending sparks raining down. The entire city seemed alive with alarms, sirens echoing through every street. They won't stop, Leora gasped, her voice trembling. They don't know how to stop, Daniel replied, his tone hard. But neither do I. He pulled the taxi into a narrow passage between 2 towers. The gap so small, the wings scraped metal. Sparks burst around them, the sound sharp like thunder. The guards tried to follow, their larger ships smashing against the walls. 2 exploded instantly, the fire lighting up the night. Leora gasped, but Daniel's face remained cold, his focus unbroken. You've flown this path before, she realized. Daniel gave a bitter smile. When you live at the bottom, you learn all the cracks in the system. The taxi burst out of the narrow gap and into the crowded market lanes of the mid-city. Dozens of flying vehicles swarmed the air. Glowing signs filled the horizon. Daniel darted into the chaos, weaving between ships like a shadow. The guards thundered behind, firing into the crowd. Aliens screamed, ships spun out of control. The air burned with panic. Leora's heart ached as she saw innocent people caught in the chase. They're hurting. Everyone just to catch me, she whispered. Daniel's jaw clenched, his voice low and sharp. That's what power does, princess. It doesn't care who bleeds. The guards grew closer, their weapons locking onto the taxi. Daniel slammed the controls forward, sending them into a vertical climb. The engines groaned, the frame shuddered, but the taxi rose like a desperate bird. Above them, the stars peeked through the smog. For a moment, Leora stared upward, imagining freedom in that endless black sky. But the guards were relentless, rising after them like a storm of fire. Hold tight, Daniel growled. He pulled the taxi into a spin, the world twisting around them. The guards fired, their shots missing by inches as Daniel spun downward again. The sudden drop ripped the air from Leora's lungs, her scream swallowed by the roar of engines. The taxi plummeted toward the industrial sector, where giant smokestacks belched fire and steam. Daniel guided them between the pipes, weaving through. Rivers of molten light explosions lit the air behind them as the guards struck the machinery. Metal rained down, the city trembled, but still Daniel pressed forward. Leora could hardly breathe, but her eyes never left him. There was no fear in his movements, only precision. He was more than a driver. He was a survivor, forged by every moment of struggle. Her heart whispered something strange, something dangerous. She was starting to trust him. Why risk this? She shouted over the chaos. Why not throw me out and save yourself? Daniel's eyes flicked to her for the briefest second. Because I already know what it feels like to be hunted, he said. And because I'm tired of running alone. Before she could answer, the guards unleashed drones. Small, fast machines zipped through the air, their red eyes glowing like demons. They swarmed around the taxi, firing bursts of energy. One struck the side, the cabin shaking violently, sparks flying. Leora cried out, clutching the seat as smoke filled the air. "Daniel!" she screamed. "I see it," he muttered, slamming the controls. The taxi rolled sideways, smashing 2 drones against a pipe, but more came, faster, sharper, their weapons slicing through the night. Daniel's jaw tightened, sweat on his brow. He pulled the taxi into a hidden service shaft, the walls closing in on both sides. The drones followed, crashing against the narrow metal space. The shaft lit with fire as explosions shook the structure. But Daniel kept pushing forward, his hands steady as stone. Finally, the shaft split into 3 paths. Without hesitation, he dove left, the drones splitting apart, confused by the sudden choice. Half slammed into the wrong path, bursting into flame. The rest tried to follow, but Daniel triggered a hidden lever. Steel doors crashed shut behind them, sealing the shaft. The drones exploded against the barrier, their fire lighting the tunnel. The taxi emerged into silence, the city stretching far below them. Leora's chest heaved, her eyes wide with shock and awe. "You knew about that tunnel," she whispered. Daniel gave a faint smirk. "Like I said, I know all the cracks." For a brief moment, peace returned, the stars above shining clear. Leora leaned back, her body trembling, her voice soft. "You saved me again," she said, almost in disbelief. Daniel's eyes flicked toward her, his tone guarded. "Don't mistake it for mercy," he said. "This city eats people alive. I'm just making sure it doesn't eat me today." But deep inside, he knew the truth. Something about her words, her courage, was stirring a fire he thought was long dead. And though he told himself it was only survival, he felt it. He was no longer running only for himself. Far behind, the guards regrouped, their fleet spreading like vultures across the sky. The chase was not over, not even close, but inside the small battered taxi, 2 lives had begun to change. The hunted princess and the human outcast, bound by danger, bound by defiance, and together, without even knowing it yet, they had taken the first step toward rebellion. The taxi drifted through the upper sky, smoke trailing from its battered engines. Below them, the city glowed with endless lights. Above them, the stars stretched wide and silent. For the first time since the chase began, there was a pause, a fragile moment of quiet. Leora leaned back in her seat, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths, her hands trembling from the fight. Daniel gripped the controls tightly, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The silence between them grew heavy. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice low and sharp. "This ends now," he said. "I've done enough. I saved you more than once, but I can't keep this up." Leora turned to him, her eyes wide, fear rising again. "You're leaving me?" she whispered. Daniel didn't look at her. His gaze remained cold. "If I stay with you, they'll kill me. And I've survived too long to die for someone I don't even know." The words cut deep, sharper than any blade. Her heart sank, but she refused to let despair take her. "You think I asked for this?" she said, her voice trembling. "Do you think I wanted you caught in my fate?" Daniel's hands tightened on the wheel, his silence speaking louder than words. Leora leaned closer, her voice desperate now. "If you leave me here, they'll take me, and everything I've done will be for nothing." Daniel finally looked at her, his eyes burning with conflict. "You don't understand," he said, his voice breaking for the first time. "I've seen what happens to humans who get in the way. They vanish. No one even whispers their names. I can't." He stopped, his breath uneven. Leora stared at him, her heart pounding. "Then why did you save me in the first place?" she asked. Her question hit him like a blade, his face tightening with pain he could not hide. The taxi rattled as the engines coughed, the damage from the chase pressing down on them. Outside, faint red lights flickered in the distance. The guards were still hunting. Always hunting. Time was running out. Leora placed her hand on the seat between them, her voice softer now, but stronger too. "Daniel, I know you've lost everything. I know this world has chained you. But don't you see? That's why we have to fight. That's why we can't give up." Daniel turned away, his jaw clenched. "You talk about fighting like it's a choice," he muttered. "But for me, survival was the only choice." Her eyes burned with fire. "Then, make a new choice," she said, her voice fierce. "Choose to live, not just survive. Choose to help me, and I promise, I will not let your life mean nothing." Her words echoed inside him, cutting through years of silence, years of hiding. He remembered his brother's face, the sound of his parents' tired breaths, the chains wrapped around every part of his life. He had told himself freedom was a lie, but now, sitting beside this runaway bride, he felt something he had buried long ago. Hope? The distant hum of engines grew louder. The guards were closing in again. Daniel's grip tightened on the controls, his body frozen between two paths. One path meant letting her go, escaping into the shadows, staying alive but empty. The other path meant standing with her, facing death, but maybe finding something greater. He closed his eyes for a moment, hearing his own voice whisper in the dark. "No more running." Leora leaned forward, her eyes locked on him. "What will you do?" she asked, her voice steady despite her fear. Daniel opened his eyes, the storm inside them finally clear. He looked at her, his words sharp but filled with fire. "I'll fight," he said. "But understand this, once I make this choice, there's no turning back." Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled through them. "Then we fight together," she whispered. The engines roared louder, the guards breaking through the clouds behind them, red lights glowing like a swarm of predators. Daniel pulled the taxi into a sharp turn, his voice steady and strong now. "Hold on, princess, this ride isn't ending here." The taxi shot forward, fire bursting from its engines. Leora clung to the seat, her fear swallowed by determination. For the first time, she was not running alone. Daniel's hands were steady, his eyes burning. This was no longer just survival, this was war. The guards unleashed their fury, beams of energy slicing through the night. Daniel darted between them, weaving through fire, his every move precise. Leora shouted warnings, pointing. Out the ships closing in from above, they moved together like two parts of one desperate heart. Every second death came closer, but every second Daniel refused to yield. Inside the taxi, the air was filled with heat, smoke, and the pounding of hearts. Outside, the city burned with chaos, alarms echoing into the stars. But in that storm of fire and fear, Daniel had made his choice, and Leora had found her first ally. They were hunted, outnumbered, and nearly broken. Yet for the first time, she felt truly alive. For the first time, he felt truly free, and together, they would not bow. Not tonight, not ever. The night sky burned with light as the chase thundered on. Daniel's taxi darted between towers, fire chasing them at every turn. But his hands were steady now, his eyes sharp, his choice already made. He would not abandon her, not anymore. Leora sat beside him, her heart racing yet her gaze firm. For the first time, she was not only running away, she was running toward something. Freedom no longer felt like a dream, it felt like a path opening in the chaos. The guards pressed closer, their fleet spreading wide, cutting off every escape route. Red beams tore across the sky, explosions lighting up the night, but Daniel refused to bend. He pulled the taxi lower, weaving through the ruins of the old industrial district. The air shimmered with smoke and fire, shadows danced across rusted towers. Here, the city was forgotten, abandoned by the powerful, but Daniel knew it well. These streets belong to ghosts, he muttered, and tonight we join them. The guards followed, their ships roaring, shaking the ground below. Leora leaned forward, her voice tense. We can't outrun them forever, she said. We need to strike back or they will hunt us until the end. Daniel's jaw tightened, his mind racing. You want to fight? He asked, his voice edged with disbelief. You said it yourself, she replied, her eyes burning. Better to die free than live in chains. Her words cut through him like fire. He remembered his brother's voice, the last thing he had said. Before being dragged away, don't let them break you. Daniel had buried those words, but now beside Leora they rose again. He gritted his teeth, a spark of defiance flaring to life. Then we don't run, he said. We hit back. The guards surged forward, their weapons glowing brighter. Daniel pulled the taxi into a narrow ravine, a forgotten mining trench outside the city walls. The walls rose high on both sides, jagged and sharp. The guards followed, their ships crowding in. Confident they had trapped their prey, Leora looked around, her breath quick. Daniel, what are you doing? He smirked faintly, his eyes locked on the glowing rocks ahead. Ending the chase, he triggered a switch on the dashboard, old and rusted. Explosive charges hidden in the mining trench came to life, their lights blinking red. Leora gasped, her eyes wide. You set traps here? Daniel's voice was steady. When you live hunted, you make your own safe places. The guards closed in, their ships filling the trench, their weapons aimed. Daniel waited, his finger hovering over the control. Now, he whispered. He pressed the switch. The trench exploded with fire, rocks collapsing, walls breaking apart. The guards screamed as their ships were crushed, torn apart by the storm of fire and stone. The sky shook, the ground roared, and in seconds, half the fleet was gone. Silence followed. Broken only by the crackle of flames, Leora's chest heaved, her eyes wide with awe. You destroyed them, she whispered. Daniel's face was hard, but his voice was quiet. No, not all of them. More will come. They always come. But in his eyes there was something new, not just survival, but defiance. The taxi rose from the trench, smoke trailing behind, above. The stars stretched endless, brighter than ever. For a moment, it felt as if the sky itself was opening for them. Leora looked at him, her voice soft but steady. You didn't have to help me, but you did, and now you're part of this fight too. Daniel shook his head, though a faint smile touched his lips. I didn't choose a fight, he said, but maybe the fight chose me. They flew beyond the city into the wastelands where silence ruled. Here, no lights, no towers, only endless dark and the whisper of the wind. It was dangerous, but it was free. Leora leaned back, exhaustion washing over her. Yet inside, her spirit blazed brighter than ever. She had lost her family, her home, her old life. But she had found something new. Hope. Daniel looked at her, his voice quieter than before. You know they won't stop your father. Groom the guards, they will hunt you until the end. Leora met his gaze, her eyes fierce. Then let them, she said, because I will never stop fighting back. Her words filled the cabin, strong and unbreakable, and Daniel knew then, without speaking, that his choice was final. He was with her now, wherever this path led. The horizon glowed faintly with the First light of dawn. For Leora, it was not just another sunrise, it was the birth of something greater. She was no longer a runaway bride, no longer a pawn in her father's games. She was free and she was not alone. For Daniel, it was the first time he had felt the fire of purpose since his family was taken. He was no longer just a human taxi driver hiding in shadows. He was a fighter, an ally, a spark. Together, in that small battered taxi, two broken lives had joined. One was hunted for defiance, the other for existence, but side by side, they had chosen the same road, the road of rebellion. And though the world would soon rise, against them they both knew one truth. This was only the beginning of something greater.